In the final summer before the war darkened Europe's skies, the people of Liechtenstein lived in a suspended calm. The Rhine flowed quietly past their fields, alpine peaks guarded their borders, and the capital, Vaduz, dozed in midday sun. At first glance, this was a country untouched by the tremors shaking the continent, but those who governed it knew better. Prince Franz Joseph II stood by the arched window of the royal palace, his silhouette cut against the mountains. He was young, in his early 30s, yet the weight of his new rule bowed his shoulders. His uncle, Franz I, had abdicated only a year before, quietly withdrawing from public life as Nazi Germany devoured Austria next door. The prince's eyes scanned the northern horizon. Austria was now gone, folded into Hitler's Reich with thunderous applause and marching boots. The shadow was growing, and Liechtenstein had no army, no alliances, and nothing but resolve. "I received a letter from Bern this morning," said Otto Reinberger, the prince's closest advisor, stepping softly into the chamber. A quiet man with silver hair and a reputation for caution, Otto rarely showed emotion. Today, his expression was unreadable. "The Swiss want reassurance we will follow their lead in case of conflict," Otto continued. "They're afraid the Germans might use us as a backdoor, should war come." The prince turned. "And what reassurance do we give?" Otto hesitated, then handed him the letter. "That we remain neutral, as always." Neutrality. It had kept Liechtenstein alive in a world where empires rose and fell, but it now felt like a thin cloak in a winter storm. Across the border, German troops trained in Alpine warfare. The Third Reich's propaganda was seeping across their radios. A small but growing faction within the principality had begun whispering about pan-Germanic destiny, young men who hung swastika flags from barns after midnight. They were few, but loud. The prince read silently, then lowered the letter. "Begin drafting our formal position," he said. "Align it with the Swiss. And let the people know. Our allegiance is to independence, not conquest." "Yes, Your Highness." That night, as the town's lights dimmed under blackout drills that had become routine, a stranger arrived at the palace gates. He wore a worn coat and carried a battered suitcase, but his posture was erect, almost military. His papers identified him as Alexei Voronov, a former Russian officer turned historian, now stateless and seeking refuge. He had crossed half of Europe to escape both Hitler and Stalin. Otto interviewed him personally, seated in a bare room with only a lamp between them. "You say you were imprisoned by the NKVD?" Otto asked. "For 8 years," Voronov replied. "I survived Siberia. Not many do." "And you came here. Why Liechtenstein?" Voronov leaned forward. "Because no one else is small enough to be brave." Otto said nothing. Later, he placed Voronov's file on the prince's desk. "I recommend we watch him, but he may be useful. Knows the language of power and fear. That is becoming a rare skill." Within weeks, Voronov was quietly hired by the Principality's internal office for foreign documentation. Officially, he translated legal texts. Unofficially, he interpreted the coded tones of German and Soviet correspondence, decoding intentions hidden in dry language. He became a quiet fixture in the palace, a ghost of collapsed empires who now served a miniature one. The first true test came not with tanks, but with paper. In late 1939, weeks after Germany invaded Poland and the British declared war, a request arrived from Berlin. It was polite, on the surface, a diplomatic suggestion that Liechtenstein should participate in regional cooperation efforts to stabilize Europe. Enclosed was a list of items: raw materials, financial support, access to roads. It was not a demand, but neither was it a request. The prince called a meeting that same night. Otto, Voronov, and the finance minister crowded around the letter. "If we say yes," Otto began, "we become a vassal. If we say no, we draw attention, we cannot survive. And if we say nothing, Voronov asked. Then we gamble that the Reich has bigger prey, Otto replied. The room fell silent. It's not just a political decision, the prince said finally. It's a moral one. If we bend now, we may never stand again. They agreed on a reply, one page, respectfully declining involvement in extraterritorial matters. The letter was sent through Swiss channels, wrapped in the language of diplomacy so tight it squeaked. Days turned into weeks. No response came. But something had changed. Unmarked men began watching the borders. A schoolteacher who had once praised German efficiency was found beaten in his home. Far-right pamphlets appeared in Vaduz, printed with money no one could trace. A message was being delivered. Otto grew anxious. They are testing how much we value silence. Voronov, unshaven and sleepless, nodded. And how much we fear noise. Then came the second message, an anonymous delivery left at the palace gates. Inside, a single object, a rusted bullet casing from the Polish front. No note, no fingerprint. Prince Franz Joseph II held it in his hand for a long time, turning it over in the lamplight. They're telling us what silence buys, he said. It would be Voronov who later uncovered that the bullet had been taken from the site of a massacre, delivered not as a threat, but as a warning. Collaborate or face irrelevance, or worse, extinction. But the prince made his decision. He convened the full council in public, the first time since the war began. Cameras from Swiss and foreign press attended. In a calm, unwavering voice, he declared that Liechtenstein would remain neutral, not in spirit, not in sentiment, but in action. No roads would be opened, no funds redirected, no allegiance given, save to the survival of his people. It was a risk. It may have been a death sentence, but the world was watching now. In a small village near the eastern ridge, an old farmer tuned his radio as the speech played again on loop. He sat beside his daughter, who asked what it meant. "It means we're still free," he whispered, "for now." And in Berlin, a general placed the prince's speech beside others marked low threat, a footnote, an afterthought. But sometimes it is the quietest footnotes that become the loudest echoes, and the war was only just beginning. Winter blanketed Liechtenstein in silence. Snow softened the mountain paths, muffled footfalls in Vaduz, and turned the narrow valley into something almost timeless. But the illusion of peace grew thinner by the day. While the world fought and borders were redrawn in blood, the principality remained a sliver of defiance, not through strength, but stubborn resolve. And that made it dangerous. Inside the palace library, Otto Reinberger pored over intercepted messages filtered through Swiss intelligence. The reports had grown more pointed, coded communications between German officials hinting at neutral territories of strategic nuisance. Liechtenstein, Otto feared, was slipping from obscurity into relevance. Alexei Voronov stood nearby, expression unreadable as always. He held a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with his transcriptions and half-translated phrases. He pointed to a line. "They've begun cataloging our industrial assets," he said quietly. "The little we have. They even mentioned Hilti." "The tool manufacturer?" Otto raised an eyebrow. "Every factory is a weapon if you're desperate enough," Voronov replied. Otto nodded grimly. "And they're growing desperate." The war on the Eastern Front had turned brutal. Hitler's ambition met Russia's frozen will, and men died by the thousands every day. Germany needed resources, metals, roads, neutrality breached. Liechtenstein, small as it was, now mattered precisely because it had refused to choose a side. In the weeks that followed, pressure intensified. German envoys visited Vaduz under the pretense of economic consultation, though everyone knew they were spies. Rumors of a possible annexation swirled. The prince received thinly veiled offers from Reich officials to integrate Liechtenstein into the greater German administrative system. They promised protection, stability, partnership. Franz Joseph II met them all with the same calm resolve. "We are not an arm to be twisted," he told Otto afterward, "but we are not fools either. We will bend, if only slightly. We just cannot break." To buy time, he authorized symbolic gestures, welcoming German tourists, allowing art exhibitions curated by Austrian institutions now under Nazi control, carefully crafted neutrality like walking a tightrope in a hurricane. But not all were content to play the game. A man named Kurt Gessner began making noise in the countryside. A Liechtensteiner by birth but educated in Berlin, he returned under the guise of farming. Within weeks, he was organizing youth groups under the banner of cultural pride. His meetings were secret but attended. His speeches evoked unity with the Germanic world. He praised Hitler subtly, never enough to provoke legal action, but too boldly to ignore. Otto brought the reports to the prince. "We must watch him," Otto said, "but not silence him. If we censor too quickly, we give the Reich the pretext they need." Franz Josef agreed. "Then we let his words expose him." But Voronov disagreed. "You give a flame air, it grows," he said. "Better to smother it before the wind changes." Still, the prince insisted on restraint. In a world on fire, their resistance would be quiet. It was in this atmosphere of quiet crisis that a different message arrived, delivered not by diplomat, but by refugee. She came on foot across the border from Austria, guided by darkness and desperation. Her name was Ilse Müller, and she claimed to carry something the Reich wanted buried. The guards at the southern checkpoint nearly turned her away until she said one word: Voronov. In the basement of the palace, they met again after 13 years. Voronov's face stiffened when he saw her. They had known each other in Leningrad, before the camps, before exile, before history burned their lives to ash. Ilse's story came out in jagged fragments. She had worked in an archive in Vienna, reassigned after the Anschluss to catalog sensitive documents. Among them, she found correspondence between Nazi economic officers and Swiss banks, evidence of secret transactions, laundering funds through microstates to support operations outside the Reich's official war effort. One of the shells for these funds? A Liechtenstein chartered firm. "They'll come for this," she said, slipping a roll of microfilm into Voronov's hand. "And they won't be polite." Otto confirmed its authenticity within days. The film contained names, dates, bank routing paths, the kind of data that could shatter illusions of neutrality if leaked. If Germany believed Liechtenstein was a liability, they wouldn't hesitate to crush it. "We've kept the outside world away to stay safe," the prince said, staring at the projector's dim image. "But perhaps now we need them to see us." Otto frowned. "You mean, leak it?" "To the Allies," Voronov said. It was unthinkable. To betray even a whisper of German dealings was to sign a death sentence. But to sit on the information meant being complicit. The debate lasted days. In the end, they made a plan. Voronov would travel to Zurich, disguised as a courier, and deliver the microfilm to a British liaison. In return, the Allies would elevate Liechtenstein's neutral status through diplomatic broadcasts, make them too visible to crush without international outcry. A thin shield, but better than none. Before dawn, Voronov prepared to leave. Ilse met him at the gates, her breath fogging in the cold. "Why help us?" he asked her. "After everything." She hesitated, then shrugged. "Because small things matter, and because you remembered my name." He nodded, then vanished into the snow. 3 nights later, Allied radio stations broadcast a cryptic message. "Certain neutral states, though small, have acted with great courage and principle. History will remember those who stood. Berlin responded with silence, but that silence was louder than threats. In Liechtenstein, the guards doubled their watches. Gessner's group fell mysteriously quiet. And within the palace, Prince Franz Joseph lit a candle in the chapel, not for victory, but for endurance. The war outside raged on. But within Liechtenstein, something stronger than neutrality was taking root. Conviction. The rain in Vaduz came quietly. A mist more than a storm, shrouding the capital in a veil of secrecy that mirrored the tension rippling beneath its cobblestone streets. In the weeks following Voronov's mission, a subtle transformation had overtaken the principality. It wasn't just in the tightened patrols or the late-night meetings in the palace's deeper halls. It was in the posture of the people. They moved with a mixture of pride and anxiety, aware they were being watched, but no longer content to remain invisible. Otto Reinberger kept a constant vigil. In his office, scattered with ciphered notes and British communiques, the weight of their gamble pressed down harder than ever. Each coded telegram was a potential spark. And yet nothing exploded. No tanks crossed the Rhine, no veiled threats from Berlin. The Reich had gone quiet, which frightened Otto more than a declaration of intent. Ilse Müller had taken refuge in a safe house under the care of a local family sworn to secrecy. She worked alongside Otto now, organizing intelligence and verifying names from the microfilm. Her knowledge of the Reich's internal operations was proving invaluable, but with each passing day, she grew more restless. "They're delaying for a reason," she told Otto. "That's not mercy. That's planning." Her instincts were proven correct when a courier from Switzerland arrived bearing urgent news. A German military delegation was en route, unannounced, their purpose unstated. They claimed it was a friendly inspection of economic activity. But Ilse read between the lines. "They think we still have the film," she said. "Or they want to know what else we know." The prince convened an emergency council in the palace war room, a chamber that hadn't been used since the Great War. He sat with Otto, Ilse, and a handful of senior advisors. The plan that emerged was cautious but defiant. Liechtenstein would allow the delegation on their own terms. Every move would be documented, every step shadowed by Swiss observers. Neutrality, they would insist, did not mean powerlessness. When the Germans arrived, they did so with civility cloaked in menace. 3 officers in gray uniforms led by Colonel Marcus Stein, a man with a reputation for breaking small nations through pressure rather than war. He was all smiles and compliments, praising the principality's resilience, admiring its architecture, even complimenting the prince's library. But Otto watched his eyes, saw how they lingered on the palace doors with reinforced hinges, how they scanned for routes of escape, for vulnerabilities. "You've cultivated quite a reputation, Your Highness," Stein said over dinner. "Some in Berlin wonder why a state so small should concern itself with the affairs of great empires." Franz Josef did not flinch. "Because even a small stone in the wrong place can ruin a powerful engine." Stein's smile was tight. "Indeed. But stones are often crushed." The next morning, things changed. A patrol reported a strange convoy parked just across the Austrian border. 3 transport trucks, no insignia, covered by tarps. No movement, no message. Just there. Voronov, who had returned under the cover of night after completing a second delivery to the Allies, recognized the tactic. "They're baiting us. If we move first, we justify their presence. If we do nothing, they advance. We need leverage." Ilse provided it. Buried in the second microfilm cache were records of Gessner's group receiving covert funding from Berlin, proof of Nazi subversion within Liechtenstein. If made public, it would humiliate Germany's claims of respecting neutrality. Otto suggested using the documents as a deterrent. Call a press conference, expose the truth, and dare Berlin to respond under international scrutiny. The prince hesitated. It's a final card. Once played, we cannot take it back. Ilsa looked him in the eye. And if you don't play it, we may not have a country to protect. The press conference was scheduled within 12 hours. Global correspondents arrived under heavy escort. Cameras were checked for sabotage, reporters for hidden wires. At the podium, Otto presented the documents, followed by a quiet, powerful statement from the prince. He condemned all forms of foreign interference and reaffirmed Liechtenstein's sovereign neutrality. But the words that rang loudest came from Ilsa. "I am not a soldier," she said. "I am not even a citizen. But I am here because this nation, small as it is, chose courage when it could have chosen silence. And if that is not worth defending, then what is?" Within 24 hours, the convoy disappeared. Stein and his officers left without incident, their expressions unreadable. Berlin never issued a response, but the message was received. Weeks passed. No invasion came. Instead, foreign dignitaries began arriving, one by one, quiet visits from British, French, and even American representatives. They offered no weapons, no guarantees, just acknowledgement. And in a time like this, recognition was its own shield. Otto stood once more by the palace balcony, watching as spring began to melt the last traces of snow from the mountains. Ilsa joined him. "Do you think we won?" she asked. He shook his head. "I think we survived. For now, that's enough." She smiled faintly. Survival is a kind of victory. Below them, the streets of Vaduz stirred with quiet resilience. Markets reopened. Students returned to schools. The church bells rang on time. And Liechtenstein endured. Not because it was powerful, but because it remembered that integrity, once chosen, could become a fortress no army could breach.